story. The glass shattered before anyone could stop it. Kwame's hand had come down too hard on the conference table. Not a fist, not quite, but close enough. And the tumbler of water tipped, cracked against the edge, and sent a cold river across the architectural blueprints they had spent 11 months building together. Seo-yeon jumped back. The other people in the room went very still. And in the silence that followed, something far more important than glass broke. "My name is on this project," Kwame said, his voice low, controlled in the way that a man controls himself only when he is seconds from losing it entirely. "My concept, my structural logic, my 3 a.m. phone calls to contractors who didn't speak my language." Seo-yeon looked at him. Her face was a closed door. "And my client relationships?" she said quietly. "My network, my reputation that opened the door for this project to exist at all. You want sole credit, Kwame? Then you should have worked alone." He stared at her. She stared back. Neither of them moved. That was how it ended. Not with a dramatic speech, not with shouting, not with anything that could be replayed and analyzed and resolved. It ended with two people who genuinely respected each other choosing, in one terrible moment, to let pride speak for them. The other partners quietly gathered their things. Someone mopped the water from the blueprints. Kwame picked up his coat and walked out without another word. Seo-yeon did not call him back. She told herself she would give him a day to cool down. He told himself the same thing about her. Neither of them picked up the phone. 6 months is not such a long time in the story of a city. Seoul moves fast. New glass towers climbing over old tile rooftops. Coffee shops opening in spaces that were bicycle repair stalls 3 months ago. The Han River always patient and silver and indifferent to human drama. But 6 months is an enormous length of time when you are used to speaking to someone every single day, and then suddenly you are not. Kwame threw himself into work, the way a man throws himself into cold water. Shocking, then numbing, then almost comfortable if you stayed in long enough. He took on 2 new clients in Mapogu, accepted a speaking invitation at a design forum in Busan, began drafting plans for a mixed-use residential complex that required him to be at the desk by 6 every morning. His Seoul apartment, which had always felt like a staging ground between meetings, now became the place where he lived in the fullest sense, cooking jollof on Sunday nights, filling the bookshelf he had always meant to fill, learning the names of his neighbors. From the outside, he was thriving. He would be the first to admit this, if anyone asked. "Business is excellent," he would say, in the particular tone of a man describing his business while thinking about something else entirely. What he did not say, what he did not allow himself to say even in the privacy of his own mind for the first few weeks, was that every time something genuinely exciting happened, a design breakthrough, a client calling to say the building was more beautiful than they had imagined, the moment in Busan when the audience gave him a standing ovation, his first instinct was to call Seo-yeon. She had been his sounding board for 2 years. She was the person who understood the specific texture of his ambitions, who had never needed him to translate the hunger of a man building something in a country that was not his own, because she had her own version of that hunger. They had recognized something in each other from the very first meeting, in a cramped office in Hongdae with bad lighting and good coffee, when she had looked at his portfolio and said, without any flattery, "This is serious work. I think we could make something important together." He had thought about that sentence more times than he would ever admit to anyone. Instead of calling, he would set his phone down, pour himself a drink, and sit with the silence until it became ordinary. This was what he told himself pride required. This was the tax you paid for knowing your own worth. What he did not understand, not yet, was that pride and worth are not the same thing. Seo-yeon had her own version of the same 6 months. She was more social than Kwame by nature, easier in rooms, comfortable with the performance of confidence even when it cost her. And so her thriving was louder and more visible. She launched a new firm imprint under her own name, took on a junior partner, attended every gallery opening and architecture dinner and industry mixer that crossed her calendar. Her phone was always in her hand, always lit. Anyone watching would have said she was a woman in motion, a woman arriving. She was also deeply, quietly furious. Not at Kwame exactly, or not only at Kwame. She was furious at the specific cruelty of being misunderstood by someone who was supposed to understand her. Because here was what Seo-yeon knew to be true. She had never tried to steal credit. She had tried to share it. She had tried to say, in front of clients and partners whose respect she had fought a decade to earn, "This is what we built together." And he had heard erasure in the word "we." He had heard diminishment in partnership, and that hurt. Not as a professional matter, but as something older and more personal. The hurt of a woman who had learned the hard way that in most rooms, her contributions evaporated the moment a more visible person stood beside her. She had not expected Kwame to be one more person who couldn't see her clearly. That was the grief she buried under busyness. She drafted a message to him 14 times over those 6 months. 14 different versions, some of them furious, some of them conciliatory, one of them so raw and honest that she deleted it immediately and felt embarrassed for herself. The final draft, the one she came closest to sending, read, "I think we were both wrong about different things, and I miss working with you." She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the app and went to meet a client for dinner. Later, she would think about that draft and feel the specific weight of it. The words that would have cost her very little to send. The months that would have been unlost. But that night, she simply did not want to go first. She did not want to be the one who needed it more. She had spent her entire career careful about showing need. So the weeks turned to months, and the months turned to the kind of distance that starts to feel like it has always existed. They ran into each other at a building opening in Yongsan on a cold Thursday in February. Neither of them had known the other would be there. Kwame arrived with a colleague from his Mapo project. Seo-yeon came with her new junior partner. They saw each other across a high-ceilinged atrium filled with the soft noise of an industry party. Champagne glasses murmured Korean, the clink of small ambitions, and for one suspended moment, the room contracted to just the two of them. He looked well. She noticed this immediately, and the noticing made her feel something complicated. She looked exactly the same as he remembered, which meant she looked like herself, which was the most disorienting thing about seeing her. He crossed the room. She did not move away. "Seo-yeon." He said her name like he had been holding it. "Kwame." Her voice was careful, controlled, but she did not look away. There was a pause in which 6 months of silence tried to compress itself into something that could be stood inside. Then, because neither of them was the kind of person who could sustain pretense for long, Kwame said, "Can we go somewhere quiet for a few minutes?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said simply. They found a side corridor off the main hall, half lit, with the noise of the party muffled behind them. The building they were in was someone else's work. Clean lines, good bones, the kind of architecture that made you feel a little more serious about yourself. They stood in it, awkwardly. Two architects who had forgotten temporarily how to occupy space. "I've been angry at you," Kwame said. He said it directly, not as an accusation but as a fact he was presenting honestly, before anything else. "For months." "I know," she said. "I've been angry at you too." "I know." A pause. "I kept thinking you would call." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I kept thinking the same thing about you." He looked at her. "I was wrong to walk out like that, the way I left, without giving you a chance to talk. That was not fair to you." She was quiet for a moment. He watched her process it, not performing graciousness, actually processing. That had always been one of the things he respected most about her, the fact that she took things seriously before she responded to them. "You felt like I was taking something from you," she said finally. "I understand that now better than I did then. I think I was so focused on what I needed the room to see that I didn't stop to make sure you felt fully seen first. That was a mistake." "I accused you of something you didn't do," he said. "You weren't erasing me, I know that. I think I knew it even in the moment, but I was..." He searched for the word. "I was so defended. About being seen correctly in this city, about my name meaning what I need it to mean here, and I took that out on you." "I know what that is," she said softly. "That particular fear." "I know you do." Another silence, but different from the first one, less pressurized. 6 months, she said. It was not quite a question. 6 months, he agreed. "I drafted a message to you," she said. "I think it was around month 3, I was going to tell you I missed working with you. He looked at her. Why didn't you send it? She met his eyes. Because I didn't want to need it more than you did. He laughed. A short, involuntary sound, the kind of laugh that comes out when something is too true to be funny but funny anyway. I did the exact same thing, he said. Every time something good happened, I wanted to call you. Me too. So we both sat with it. We both sat with it. The party carried on behind them, all glass and light and ambition, and they stood in the quiet corridor and understood, both of them fully, what they had done. Not the falling out. That had been almost inevitable. Two people with that much pride and that much investment, working that closely together. Something was always going to crack eventually. But the months afterward, the silence they had each tended carefully, like a wound they were too proud to treat. All the ordinary days in which a 10-second phone call would have returned them to themselves, and neither of them had made it. That was the cost. It sat between them, solid and real. No amount of warmth in this corridor would give back February or October or December. It was spent, irretrievable. I'm sorry, Kwame said. The words were plain and unhurried, the way real apologies are. Not decorated, not performed. For all of it. For the way I left. For the months I didn't call. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry too, genuinely. He extended his hand bastard. A slightly formal gesture, the kind of thing you do when you're re-establishing something real, rather than pretending the break never happened. She looked at it for a moment, then took it, and then something that had been shut for 6 months opened, not dramatically, not with any great fanfare, but completely. I want to hear about everything you've been working on, he said. I want to hear about Busan. I read about your talk. You read about it? She gave him a look. I read about all of it. He shook his head, almost smiling. Come on, let's go get a drink. A real drink, not whatever they're serving in there. They walked out of the corridor and through the atrium and out of the building together, back into the cold Seoul night, the city moving around them with complete indifference to the small human drama it had just witnessed. And they were genuinely warm, genuinely glad. The friendship was real and it was returning, and that was true. But it was also true that they were both quieter than they would have been 6 months ago, that something had aged in each of them during the time apart. That Seo-yeon's draft message, I miss working with you, had cost her nothing to write and everything to sit on. That Kwame's first instinct at every good moment had been to call her, and he had talked himself out of it 12 dozen times with a story about self-sufficiency that had never quite believed in itself. This was the thing about pride. Not the healthy version, the kind that makes you work harder and stand straighter, but the defensive kind, the fear-flavored kind. It convinces you that waiting is strength. It tells you that the person who reaches out first is the person who loses. It never tells you what you lose by waiting. 6 months of a friendship that had made both of them bigger, more grounded, more daring in their work. 6 months of a collaboration that had produced some of the best architecture either of them had done. 6 months of ordinary Tuesday evenings and industry gossip, and the specific pleasure of being known by someone who had no reason to know you, except that they chose to. They sat in a pojangmatcha 3 streets from the Yongsan atrium, the kind of low tent lit orange from inside, with soju and fried things and the noise of ordinary Seoul life happening around them. They talked for 3 hours. They laughed. Eventually, the way old friends laugh. Not performing it, just doing it. They made vague, genuine plans to work together again. They paid the bill and said goodbye on the pavement with a warmth that was real. And walking back to his apartment alone, Kwame stopped at the Han River Bridge, where he sometimes stopped when he needed to think. And he stood over the black water and felt the reconciliation fully and felt the loss fully, both at once, without trying to choose between them. Seo-yeon, walking in the other direction, did the same kind of reckoning in her own way, replaying the draft she had never sent, the months it had sat unsent, the strange economy of pride that had made holding it feel like winning. Neither of them regretted the conversation in the corridor. Neither of them wished they had stayed strangers. What they sat with, separately and quietly, was something more specific than regret, something closer to education, the knowledge, earned at full price, that the people worth fighting for are also the people worth going first for, that making yourself vulnerable to the right person is not weakness wearing confidence's clothes. It is, in fact, the only kind of courage that costs anything real. Pride is just fear wearing a better outfit.